What if Ahsoka was the Chosen One? Part 3. Ahsoka's breath was ragged as she stared at the corpse of the Akul. She might have continued to stare at it if it weren't for the noise behind her. She scrambled to her feet and spun around, only to find several other Degrudas approaching, with her master at the forefront. Relief flooded through her, but also confusion. Had they followed her? Had they watched her fight? They were soon by her side, and Master Yi gently placed her hand on Ahsoka's shoulder, praising and congratulating her on this accomplishment. Though the praise felt nice, it also stung. She didn't feel like she had been prepared for this fight in the slightest, and even when she was under the Akul, they hadn't come to help. Perhaps they had faith in her, but what would faith do if she had died? Master Yi always told her to trust in and rely on the Force. Is that what she had done? Trusted the Force? Could she rely on Master Yi if she was ever in danger, or would she leave her fate to the Force? She didn't have the time or energy to think about this as things quickly got busy. They brought the Akul back to the village on a makeshift cart where the Grun villagers proceeded to start carving it up. Not having the stomach to watch, she went to wash off the dried blood from the Akul and have her wounds looked at. She was surprised to see that her wounds weren't too severe, only a single row of claw marks and a few puncture holes from the claws, though bruises could already be seen forming. Compared to her shirt, which was in tatters and soaked in blood, she fared surprisingly well. Afterwards, as part of the tradition, for slaying the Akul alone, an ornament headdress was made for her with some of its teeth. She was soon swept up in the festive spirit that ran deep into the night, and she momentarily forgot about the events that had transpired mere hours ago. When the next morning came though, Ahsoka's whole body was sore and ached, with the memories from the previous day vivid in her mind. The headdress of the Akul's teeth felt unnatural for her to wear, but she put it on anyway. If not for this, then what was the point of going through that? The village was still lively and smiles were passing on everyone's face. Ahsoka replicated as best she could, but the uneasiness was still there. She and Master Yi left Sheila that day in the late afternoon after a big farewell from the other Degrudas. Master Yi took them back to Coruscant where they planned to stay till Ahsoka's battered body healed. Unfortunately, during this, Master Yi was given the mission by the High Council, and though Ahsoka wanted to accompany her master decided against bringing her. So, Ahsoka was left to wait out the temple. Instead of the boredom she feared though, within days of her master leaving, she found that a crowd had gathered at the base of the Jedi Temple. This fascinated her and she curiously asked about it. What she learned only filled her with longing and sadness. Apparently, the Jedi had accidentally taken in an infant without the mother's permission. Now, the mother wanted her daughter back, but the Jedi were refusing. As the protests continued at the base of the temple, Ahsoka constantly found herself wondering about her own mother. She wished her mother had loved her enough not to give her up, and was disappointed in the Jedi that they weren't allowing the child to be loved. Though she sometimes looked down at the crowd of people, and even managed to see the little girl that was in the crash, Ahsoka tried to separate herself from it. She focused on lightsaber training, even though her body still ached with every movement. As part of it, Ahsoka started learning how to wield a staff, believing it couldn't be much different from how one wielded a spear. The archives also started attracting her attention, but mostly only the records on Degrudas and Sheila. Over a month passed in which Ahsoka was mostly left to her own device inside the temple. Plo had made appearances, but he was also busy, and she had heard no word from her master. A few other Jedi took turns training her for the day, but the only noteworthy one she remembered was Master Fisto, who she enjoyed being with because of his carefree attitude and smile. This ended as Master Yi finally returned, and she took Ahsoka with her again. However, over the next year, similar instances kept on repeating. Master Yi devoted herself to Ahsoka when they were together, but she was left at the temple several more times, while Master Yi went on missions that she deemed weren't suitable for a Padawan. With her frequent stays in the temple, Ahsoka's bond with Master Yi remained shaky, but she got close with a fair number of other Jedi, though sadly none were fellow Padawans. Many happily helped her with lightsaber and staff training, as happened the first time, and the person she now most often found herself with was Battlemaster Sindralik. He had a different view of what she should study from Master Yi. The Master Yi reasoned she might battle Sith, since she was a chosen one. Battlemaster Sindralik argued that she would more likely be facing blasters, something that Forms 2 and 4 were ill suited for. Given her dual wielding, it could be done in theory, but he didn't like to rely on chance. So, when he had time for her, he focused on teaching her Form 3, a purely defensive form that was not only excellent against blasters, but also for holding her own against a superior lightsaber-wielding opponents. Over time, she learned more about all the other lightsaber forms as well. Most of the Jedi that helped train her taught her the lightsaber training techniques that they preferred. Though they also offered their help in her studies, she only occasionally accepted. This mostly because she disliked the philosophy that usually entailed. Rather, even though she had read almost everything about her people on the home planet, she still often went to the archives. Even though she quickly got bored, if she didn't want to read, Master Jocasta was always there and someone she could talk with. On her way there one day after some mundane solo lightsaber exercises, she took the shortcut through the lobby of the temple. The last thing she expected to see when she walked in though was a group of people that obviously weren't supposed to be there, running through it. Temple guards are on their heels, but were evidently trying to be non-lethal, all while the people threw stuff at the walls. Ahsoka panicked when these things started exploding. She dove behind a pillar, only to realize that, instead of actually exploding, they covered the walls with paint that formed images and words. Before she could fully look at what was now paint on the walls, a loud argument drew her attention. The ones arguing were a pair of Padawans that are in the entranceway and appearing to be directly in the way of the intruders. She immediately recognized Reva, the Mickey she had met during the Padawan trial. Before she knew what she was doing, Ahsoka was by their side as the mob people approached. They were hesitantly blocking the entranceway, but the other Padawan was nervous to hold his lightsaber. Scared of it coming to that, she anxiously turned to Reva, asking how she felt about using the Force to push them away. A tight smile formed as she agreed, and on the count of 3, they both pushed out with the Force, launching all those in front of them off their feet. Regrettably, this also included temple guards. Unfortunately, everyone was back on their feet within moments, and didn't even have time to process that several devices were now being hurled at them. Ahsoka tried to turn and cover her face, but the shockwave followed by wall paint hit them a moment later, and she was thankful that she had closed her eyes in time. She didn't even have time to shout now that there was drying paint caked onto her before the mob was shoving past them. The other Padawan was already taking care of her on the other side of the entranceway, and Reva pulled onto the other side, out of the way of the people. The intruders thankfully didn't appear to be interested in them, so they all seemed to silently agree to stay put. A calm voice echoed clear in the room a moment later, and Ahsoka immediately recognized Plo. He told the people to stop and surrender themselves, and surprisingly they complied. She realized that he must have been using mind tricks on them, as she felt compelled to join them. 7 more temple guards arrived to fully attain the group. As they were taken away, Plo and another Jedi came to them. They made sure they were alright before thanking and praising them for their brave actions. Plo patted her shoulder before they excused themselves, suggesting they go wash up. The sticky paint had by now dried on their clothes and skin, and the boy was already scurrying away. Reva and Ahsoka followed him, but before parting, agreed to meet up afterwards. Washing the paint off took longer than Ahsoka would have liked, especially having to scrub her munch holes and washing a cool headdress. She still fervently finished and rushed to the mess hall where they agreed to meet up. Reva was already there, and they talked while they ate an early lunch, catching up for the past couple of years. They hadn't been able to get too close before, but Ahsoka was excited at the chance of now becoming friends. Though Ahsoka now actually wanted to be left at the temple for the chance that Reva was also there, within a day meeting again, Master Yi returned and took Ahsoka with her. She did not leave Ahsoka at the temple again for the next few months, and Ahsoka grew worried as she realized how bad the situation in the galaxy had deteriorated in such a short time. The seeming calm just 2 years ago had been replaced with chaos and strife, though it hadn't been entirely peaceful then either. Master Yi made sure that Ahsoka knew what was happening throughout, and constantly immersed her in whatever they're doing, whether it was diplomatic negotiations or humanitarian aid. This often got in the way of her training, and Master Yi started focusing more on politics and theology, sacrificing lightsaber training or other studies. The Master Yi now freely took her to almost any world, they mostly only went if it was in political turmoil or after a disaster. Coincidentally, with their diplomatic efforts, this also meant that they unfortunately spent a lot of time on Coruscant as well. The Master Yi sometimes went to these meetings alone. She often tried to take Ahsoka with, intending for her to observe and learn. Ahsoka soon became familiar with several senators and officials, but the man she most often saw was Chancellor Palpatine. Though she was supposed to just be an observer, he frequently approached her. He was polite to her, and she was polite back, but she was always unnerved how interested he seemed to be in her life. She did enjoy talking about herself, and the attention that following Master Yi brought though. Having the chance to talk with a lot of different people was something that she often looked forward to, but the frequent interest of Chancellor Palpatine became just another reason why she didn't like staying on Coruscant. Whenever she was with him, his presence always felt off and unnatural. It was something that she had never felt before, so she didn't know what to make of it. As they were finally sent out again, she was thrilled to leave Coruscant. But it was short-lived. Before they could even arrive at their intended destination, they were recalled back to the Jedi Temple. Just after they had left, there had been an attempted assassination against a prominent senator, and the Jedi Council was nervous as to what it could mean. Ahsoka's sister wished she could as Master T conduct her own investigation into the incident. They interpreted again after only a few days of this, with Master Windu summoned Master T and every other High Council member in the temple. Ahsoka stayed by Master's side as Master Windu quickly filled them in. During a separate investigation done by a Jedi Knight, in which both a clone and droid armor were discovered, the Knight had just been captured by Count Dooku on Geonosis. His execution was already planned, and they needed to rescue him. Everyone obeyed Master Windu, so he summoned every available Jedi Master Knight in the temple, and near the Arcanus sector. Though several Jedi opted to leave their paladins at the temple, many others brought theirs. Master T permitted Ahsoka to come as well. One of the several other paladins coming besides her was Anakin, the captured Knight's apprentice. Ahsoka hadn't interacted with him since she first met him, but he still acknowledged her when he saw that she was coming. Before they left, Master T told her to bring and wear a Jedi robe. For the most part, Master T had permitted her to wear what she felt like, as long as it was modest. She had only worn the robes to try them on, but now she donned the heavy garments. Ahsoka and her master used one of the many shuttles along with the majority of the Jedi, while a few others flew the Jedi starfighters. When they got to Geonosis, she stayed close to her master as they landed and infiltrated the arena, using mind tricks to get past a few Geonosian guards. They managed to get in without raising an alarm. The master led to the stands to wait. Geonosians surrounded them, and their appearance quickly began to creep Ahsoka out. Distracted as they waited, she turned her attention to the Jedi that they were here to rescue. He was chained to a pillar in the center of the arena, though he didn't appear all that worried, even as a giant green insect-looking thing with 6 legs was guiding through the arena. By the time it was guided closest to the pillars in the center, it was rolled up into frenzy by the Geonosian guards. With the only seeming path forward, it attacked the Jedi. Ahsoka tensed, but couldn't help but get caught up in the ensuing scuffle. The Jedi almost immediately got free thanks to the giant bug breaking the chain, and from there, he was able to avoid it. He managed to get a spear from one of the guards, which he used to try and fight the bug, but that seemed to make it angrier. He then stole a mount from another Geonosian guard, who was quickly killed by the bug. It was funny to see the Geonosians being made a mockery of by the Knight. The bug had only thus far killed them and damaged the arena, instead of its intended victim. Perhaps it was for this reason that the remaining guards crawled the bug back towards the tunnel it came out of. At the same time, several things rolled into the arena surrounding the Knight. It was only then that she looked who was giving the orders. Up on a pavilion above the rest of the stand stood several individuals, one of which was someone who both Master T and Plo had told her about. Though she had only seen a hologram of his younger self, the face was unmistakable. Former Jedi Count Dooku. Master Windu appeared behind him a moment later, lightsaber ignited. This was a signal, and she watched 100 lightsabers ignite throughout the stands. Geonosians in the stands took to the sky, swarming like a disturbed insect nest. Bending her robe, Ahsoka ignited both her lightsabers as well, just as several droids came shamming out of the tunnels into the stands. She helped her master cut these down, watching her back while she faced the brunt of the Force. Ahsoka stayed close to Master T as she jumped into the arena, joining the desperate battle that started there. They unfortunately quickly got separated, and it filled Ahsoka with apprehension. She tried to follow her master's example and use Form 2, but there were too many blast bolts, so instead she quickly began using Form 3. With fear building, she frantically deflected blast bolts away from her, not caring enough to direct them at an enemy, and trying to ignore the burns from the blast bolts as she fell to deflect, which thankfully only grazed her. When her foot hit something soft though, she faltered. Looking down, she saw the body of a human. She remembered that face. They had taken the same trouble to get here. Now, his open eyes were lifeless, and his body was riddled with blaster marks. Blast bolts too continued to fly around her, and only instinct saved one from directly hitting her. With trembling hands, she resumed her defense, trying not to notice the death that she now realized littered the floor. However, now that she was aware, it was all she could see. Their pain and fear were now all she could feel in the Force before even that was snuffed out. Begging for her emotions to go numb, she soon got herself in the middle of a group of Jedi, the only ones left standing that she could see. The chaotic fighting abruptly stopped then, and she followed the gaze of the rest of the Jedi to the pavilion that Count Dooku still stood on. He started by praising their efforts, but she looked away as she saw several Jedi being led to the group. She immediately recognized Plo amongst them, and though he flinched when he saw her, he also gently nodded. Count Dooku continued, telling them to surrender and live, but Master Windu refused. With an apology from Count Dooku, the droids that had surrounded them raised their blasters again, waiting for the command to fire. The standoff only lasted a moment before noise and shadows moved over the arena. Looking up, Ahsoka saw several ships that she didn't recognize descending the arena and began firing at the droids. The droids immediately began firing as well, both back at the ships and at the Jedi. Some of the ships descended, hovering just above the ground and creating a perimeter around the group of Jedi while the rest swept through the arena, carving swaths into the droids. Several beings of white armor jumped out of the hovering ships and began firing back at the droids with long blasters. Without a command, the surviving Jedi began jumping onto the ships as the white armor-clad soldiers covered them. Ahsoka followed, fighting to not look back at the bodies that were being left behind. Because she was too scared to completely stop defending, she was one of the last to get to the shuttles. Just as she was about to jump into one, a soldier behind her fell. However, she could sense that he was still alive. Without thinking, she turned and went to him, igniting her lightsabers on the way. Shadows from the Jedi already on the shuttle followed her, but she was already by his side and using the force to drag him to the shuttle. Another soldier came to her and helped her get him on before they quickly rose into the air. As they flew, she stayed crouched by the injured soldier, not knowing what to do. She heard Grandmaster Yoda speak, and she only realized then who else was on the shuttle with her. Explosions shook the shuttle as they were fired at, and a nearby shuttle had promptly exploded, disappearing out of sight as it fell to the ground in a ball of flame. Master Windu quickly ordered the pilot to land, and he complied. It was only then that Ahsoka looked out the open doors. Massive ships were below them with small white dots swarming around, and more shuttles ferrying soldiers and large legged vehicles onto the ground. In front of them in the distance was a giant rock structure, with what seemed like an endless wave of forms coming from it. As they got closer, she realized that the dots below them were more soldiers, and the ones approaching were droids. However, the soldiers were walking straight towards the droids over the vast flat terrain. As they landed, all the Jedi jumped out besides Grandmaster Yoda, and she hesitantly followed them. A soldier was waiting for them and told Master Windu that he was awaiting his orders. As he waved his arm, Ahsoka impulsively told him to wait. She immediately regretted this, but she felt that this was wrong. Though she didn't know much about war, while studying her own planet and species, she had inadvertently read about the previous battles that had taken place there. Not only that, but she had also learned from her experience fighting the Akul. From what she understood, one should use the terrain to their advantage when fighting. After seeing how the Jedi had fared on even ground in the arena, she had little hope for these soldiers. Ahsoka hesitantly told this Master Windu. She expected a reprimand, but instead Master Windu looked conflicted before he looked towards the approaching horde of droids. Turning back to her, he asked what she would do then. Anxiously filling with her lightsabers, she told him that she didn't know, but quickly added that perhaps the soldiers did. They seemed well trained after all. Master Windu turned to the soldiers that had spoken to him, asking for his opinion. After a pause, he gave a rough plan of what he would do, which involved getting off this open plain and sending the commanders behind the lines. Master Windu told him to follow it, and for the rest of the soldiers to follow their commander as well, but to not hesitate to ask the Jedi if they needed help. He then went and spoke with the Jedi that had been on the same shuttle. They started walking back to the shuttle that was still hovering with Grandmaster Yoda on, but Master Windu came to her, thanking her for her insight and courage. He told her to stay with him till she was able to reunite with her master. Relief momentarily overtook the shock and fear that weighed heavily on her. She stayed a step behind him as they were transported to the forward command center. Though most of the surviving Jedi wins the battle again, whether it was in the skies or on the ground, Ahsoka stayed out of the action for the duration of the fighting. Though the heat was sweltering and her wounds stung, she couldn't stay still after treating her wounds. She was either observing from one of the command centers, or doing what she could for the wound that came back. It was there she learned these soldiers were part of the clone army she had heard about, even though their presence in the Force all varied. She was in the command center at the end of the day when the news came in that all remaining resistance was destroyed, though unfortunately, Count Dooku and a vast number of droids had been able to escape. The price for this victory had been awful. Almost 100 Jedi and over 2,000 clones are now dead. The constant death had been eating away at her all day, and she was struggling to accept it. She was finally reunited with her master as things were being wrapped up, and though Master Lee seemed happy to see her, Ahsoka was uneasy. She could reason with how they're separating the arena, but why had she not come looking for her sooner? Only 3 of the Paladins that had come were still alive. Had she not worried if she was one of the fallen? Did she really leave her fate to the Force again?